Okay, so welcome everybody to this afternoon's satsang. We're very fortunate to have with us today Professor Julie Davies. Me and Julie, we go back a long way, more than 30 years, when we first studied some language courses at night school. And it's a real pleasure to welcome her here today. She's a professor of management and leadership development at Brunel University in London and has been working with AIMS Delhi, India's top medical school, since 2022, looking at gender equality among physicians and their well-being and careers. She has also facilitated workshops with AIM Jamal with colleagues from Monash, Australia. She has also participated in United Kingdom business and trade missions in Mumbai, Delhi, and Ahmedabad. Before joining Brunel, she founded the MBA Health Program at University College London. At the School of African and Oriental Studies in London, she managed postgraduate distance learning courses in economics and finance. She has also taught at the Open University's MBA program for 30 years and currently has a British Academy of Management funded project on AI and healthcare worker well-being in India, Saudi Arabia, England, and Singapore. So over to you, Julie.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. This relates to a project with my colleague, Dr. Kamal Galati, who's AIMS Delhi. And he's interviewed a group of 30 women, many of whom have done the Chevening Fellowship. So we're going to talk through our initial findings from these interviews with these 30 women. And we're aiming for a particular journal on work, employment, and society. So the topic is work-life tensions and women-led empowerment, so Nari Shakti in India. So just looking at what does Nari Shakti mean, the various forms, how it links to Viksit Bharat 2047, and how does it actually manifest in a context where India, I think, is 18th in the world for gender inequality, and yet fourth in the world for a rapidly growing economy. And then just contextualizing our research within the literature about working lives for women in India, and we'll look at some quotations from the women themselves related to their levels of autonomy and empowerment and disempowerment and what they think of Nari Shakti. So I really appreciate your thoughts on this agenda, this policy agenda to support socio-economic growth within India to be a developed country by 2047. Okay, so if we go to the origins slide, thank you. So the next one. So I guess if we're looking at the kind of history of this, in ancient India, there's been in the past a focus on feminine power and the power of goddesses in religion and feminism, various waves of feminism as well. And then in 2014, this slogan, particularly we see in government policy about Nari Shakti, and particularly in relation to politics and representation in Parliament in 2013. So moving on, you can see various reports from the ministry. If we can move to the next slide, that reports on how well society is doing in terms of Nari Shakti. So you've got this definition from Modi himself on the previous slide. Oh yes, so this definition of what is Nari Shakti. So it's the determination of India's women, their power, imagination, ability to take quick decisions, their rigor to achieve set goals, and the culmination of their hard work. This is the identity of our Nari Shakti. And then the next slide, Narendra Modi talking about women no longer being just seen as homemakers, but actually nation builders. And you've got various initiatives that you can see in that research unit the Press Information Bureau has issued. And then going on to the next slide, this is very much couched in development economics. So how do you have a successful society if you ignore half the population? So obviously it's very important to look at the whole life journey of women and overcome these socioeconomic barriers that stop them fully contributing to socioeconomic success. And then the next slide mentions Viksit Bharat. So to be held as a developed country, although I guess you might wonder what is happening in Japan. Women, there's a lot of gender inequality in a very developed country like Japan. How is this Nari Shakti rhetoric actually being implemented in practice so that you can have developed country statehood or nationhood? So this figure of this woman with multiple hands shows where they see women are going to be empowered in the workplace as entrepreneurs. Extended maternity leave. India has some of the best maternity leave in the world in the formal economy of 26 weeks. And the armed forces, we saw on Republic Day on Monday, very senior women in the 3 armed forces who are leading the parade. So moving on to the next slide is an interesting, famous picture of Mother India, Bharat Mata, who's doing lots of things, very polymathic woman here. She's, in one hand, she has a manuscript, which is a symbol of wisdom. In another hand, agriculture. In another hand, spirituality. And in a fourth hand, this symbol of the white cloth symbols, Swadeshi movement. So you've got echoes of the previous icon of women being empowered with multiple contributions to society coming from Tagore's famous photo, from his famous portrait. And then moving on, we saw just the other day these senior army officers, Navy officers, and RAF officers who were very prominent in the Republic Day parade. And then looking at the next slide, looking at the kind of spiritual side of worshipping women in society and in religion, looking at the Shakti, the energy, the feminine wisdom and ability to transform, that's well understood. So how do you translate this into reality, socioeconomic? Going on to the next slide with the World Economic Forum report in 2025, showing that India ranked actually 131 out of 148 countries for gender equality, with a huge gender parity score, one of the lowest in South Asia after Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh, and just above the Maldives and Pakistan, with various other indicators suggesting there is huge scope for improvement. So moving on to the next slide, the world economic situation and prospects for 2026, very, very exciting. India as the fastest growing major economy in the world, despite Trump's tariffs, and a predicted growth rate of 6.6%, which is huge in the economy. Okay, so within this context of Nari Shakti rhetoric in government, in the armed forces, Shakti in as goddesses, looking at various goddesses like Shakti and Durga and so on. When writing up this paper, we're looking at what's already been said. So we're very keen to be published in this journal, which is a top journal, Work, Employment and Society. So the next slide just shows a whole load of articles from this journal that have looked at India and working lives. So there was a review recently. Hammer looked at what has been written in this journal and what might be needed in future. So they concluded that there aren't many publications in this top journal about India. There are very few publications by Indian scholars, so that's a huge gap. So given, the size of India in the economy, we're certainly not publishing enough about India in our literature. And there are these contradictions that you may have a growth rate of 6 to 7%, but actually the employment growth is only 1%, and still female formal participation in the workforce is very tiny. And in the world I look at of physicians, again, the ratio of women doctors in the workforce is relatively low, and the attrition rates are quite high, even though more women than men are enrolling in medical school in many parts of the world, including in India. So as this slide says, there's much more to look at in terms of employment in India, and also the role of the state. So I'm interested in how this government policy, this rhetoric of Nari Shakti, is actually being implemented on the ground. And it's quite interesting it's moved from women development to women-led development, which you could criticize or critique that, why are the women only responsible for leading the development, if you read it that way, because it's a whole of society that needs to change systems and cultures and structures to improve women's prospects in society. That last article on this slide looked at women in science, in institutes of higher education in science and technology, and it looked at professional women and their challenges in the workplace with motherhood, marriage, looking after, caring for extended family, and being torn between, their own careers and societal expectations of what women should do. The next slide is just a whole list of other articles, and there's been quite a lot written about call centers in India. So what's it like to work in a call center as a man or a woman? Also in rural public works, construction, garment factories, and strangely enough, commercial surrogacy. And a paper by Hill about the informal economy. So we're really looking at people mainly in the formal economy who are socioeconomically really part of the elite, very well educated, and what they've been doing. And we look particularly at gender. There are a couple of references to caste and age and marital status. A few of the women decided not to get married at all in our sample, and quite a few of them have gone into entrepreneurship or activism, as well as progressing their careers in mainstream jobs. Okay, so the next slide moves on to the questions we asked in our sample. So they were mainly done on recorded people from all around the country. And because my colleague was a Chevening Fellow at Oxford, this was part of his network, mainly in these people are Chevening Fellows themselves, or they were. So we asked them to tell us about their personal and their career history, any particular challenges they've had, experiences with discrimination, how they compared themselves with male colleagues, what their views were of Nari Shakti, the kind of support they have in the workplace and at home from their families, what their families thought of some very odd decisions. One is a free diver, another one's a mountaineer, trekker, what their families thought of their career choices, what their experiences were of being a leader and resistance to that role, and try to end positively, what were their views on the importance of hope and optimism to drive change, and then finally, given the proliferation of AI in the workplace, what they thought of changes in the future of work. Okay, so the final few slides are just some quotes from these women and a sort of theoretical framework we've come up with to sort of look at how to make sense of this, what kind of arguments, what's useful theoretically and what's actually useful practically going forward. So some of these women were highly qualified, they'd had doctorates, they had 3 or 4 degrees, and some of them were also very technical, and some of them moved from technical roles to work in NGOs and activism. So they're very driven. So here's an example from the first one. So she went to IIT, she was a coder, she had an offer from the US to go and work there. And at some point she decided she wanted to work for Teach India and became a school teacher. So she went to a top school, a top university, and she ended up teaching 5th grade classes. Then she became, she worked in professional services, she worked in the radio. She had a very checkered, she moved around a lot. But she said, from all this great varied experience, I can break down any idea for a 5th grader to understand, so I can explain myself clearly. I can analyze big topics, which is what she did when she worked for professional service, and I can think on my feet, which is what she had to do when she worked in the radio. And she complained, we're so used to linear careers, just going up the ladder. We should see other perspectives. And she did her internship, her scholarship in the UK, second master's, a PhD, and she moved in a completely different direction, working with NGOs. The second one was a university academic, and she started off her life working in remote villages in public health in the development sector. And she was married to quite a famous CEO, actually. The third one worked in journalism, and then she ended up creating a niche business for disabled people to do trekking in the outdoors. And that was what gave her a sense of purpose. It was actually being a mountaineer and telling the story of this, as well as being quite a tough journalist working in quite male domains of journalism. Another one had a whole host. I think she was a CEO eventually. So she'd done social work, psychology, law, public relations, human resource management, and then she became an activist on boards in various organizations. And this is quite a common theme we'll be finding in the UK and other places. Women on boards are really powerful. Women need to be in boardrooms, and often they're not. And then here's another example of someone who started off in the corporate sector, could quite easily have stayed there, earning lots of money. But she worked for a research company, a major software organization, in IT, NGO, and then she decided to work in the political economy as an advisor. And then finally, the last one here, someone worked as a civil engineer, top education from an IIT, and now she's working in a major Microsoft multinational company on projects that support women and children. So she used her IT skills to get somewhere else. And she's making a difference in the community. So these were not typical career trajectories by any means. Okay, so that was qualifications and work experience. The second slide looks at how they felt they were empowered. So a couple of women said, there's no way I want to get married. I've chosen to be single, and that's it. And it's about me growing and making a difference. So that was the first one. I could have got married at 24, 25. I didn't do it. I made a conscious decision not to go to the US, not to be a software engineer, but to make a difference. Second one was a corporate lawyer. Again, I'm not going to get married. It's my life, and I got on with it. And then the third one, again, they were pressurizing her to stay in the financial services. And she made a choice when she got married to move away and again, get involved in activism. So you could argue these people are just lucky. They're comfortable, their family background, they've had a good education, they somehow they can, do these things and have choices in a society where a lot of people, Nari Shakti does not mean you have personal choice. Okay, the third section we looked at, the third theme was disempowerment. And even the most senior women, CEOs, head of NGOs, said, people don't take me seriously, especially junior men. They ignore me, they talk to other men. Another one, workplaces are designed for men. They don't care about maternity leave, childcare leave, that's resented. Men don't look you in the eye. As an entrepreneur, I went to open a bank account. It took me 6 months because I'm a woman and I have to work twice as hard. 2 of those people said they have to work double the amount that the men do. And then there were cases of harassment that people mentioned. So one colleague commented on my body shape. Some guy at a meeting put his hand on my thighs, and it's like, wow. And just the availability that women are just available to work all day and night. And seriously, everyone said, I get paid less than my male counterparts. And this one was the only woman director in a company, and she was paid much less. So the fourth theme is the next one, is about how they evidence their Nari Shakti and how activist and entrepreneurial these amazing women were. And this woman said, I really am quite happy to speak up. We've been working very hard on our strategy, and if something's not working, I'll just say it as it is. Another woman in childhood, she said she was busy overworking. It was a common theme. She'd go to the university all day, go to lectures, volunteer before and after classes, and encourage her friends to become volunteers too, because literally, I want to change the world. And the other one, this last example here, I founded a social enterprise to fight back against the system. I'd rather fix something once than try and fix it every day. So there was a lot of agency amongst these workers. And then the last slide on these themes of Nari Shakti were when we asked women explicitly, what do you think of this policy? And the social scientist academic was the most vociferous. So that second quote there, all this Nari Shakti is just empty rhetoric. I don't think there's any substance in it. Women's bodies go through cycles of immense suffering, which is not recognized. There's not enough recognition of the emotional and physical toll that women face. Nari Shakti is a scam. It's a trap. It was very negative. On the other hand, there were more positive comments. The first one, Nari Shakti is about being proactive. All the women in my life have taken, sacrificed things, and I stand on their shoulders as an unmarried woman to make a difference. The third one, again, this reference to bodies. People, they don't take account of maternity leave, menopause, all these other things that women go through. And she was arguing the entire ecosystem needs to change. You don't blame the women, or you don't ask the women to fix things for the women. You have to change the ecosystem and the design of work, the workplace and society. And then finally, this woman talked about the men. We haven't empowered men enough to take on caring roles. So why is there no paternity or parental leave for men? That, like Nordic models, that would make it much easier if men actually could get involved in childcare and looking after their kids as well. Okay, so that was the last of the quotes. The next slide just tries to show, what is impacting on women's empowerment. Clearly, government policy is great. You've got fantastic maternity leave. The labour market, jobs, not enough jobs are being created. There's lots of inequality within organisations. These women are having fantastic educational backgrounds, and some of them are really interesting careers. And they are becoming entrepreneurs and activists. But some of them had very supportive childhoods and others quite constrained. And clearly there's lots of differences in different regions of India. Okay, the next slide, is just kind of to show this in a different way, the trajectory. So we would like to do more in our paper about the role of the state, because this journal says papers don't tend to look at that. All right, so that's it. So last slide. Yeah. So thank you very much. I think we've got just 5 minutes if there are any questions, comments, and thank you for your attention.
Right. So Karanji, would you like to open the floor for discussion?
If anybody would like to ask Professor Davies anything, we're most welcome.
It was a very nice presentation. Thank you. There are a lot of information and
Maybe you'd like to share from your experiences. Is things getting better for women in the workplace? Or?
Well, I am a homemaker and I'm holding fort at home when husband travels, and the older one's in uni, and the younger one is now going to go join a college soon. So I haven't been in a work. I think I quit my work in 2009 and haven't worked since. So I'm happy the way I am. I haven't really had, even when I worked, I don't think I had any difficulties.
Mm-hmm. And would you like to go back to work? Is that possible, or
I
encouraged
haven't,
later?
well, I'm
Yeah.
encouraged, yeah, definitely by my husband and kids and my brothers. It's just that I haven't thought that far.
Right.
Right. So anyone else has anything to say? If I may just ask, thank you so much for coming over to present. So I'm Srinivas. Um, uh, Perhaps we could have had a little more of an overview of why, to begin with, why was this being studied, and is there work actually? Is that an ongoing work that we hope to see more kind of data come through as time goes on, and how is it going to be disseminated to the actual public in India? Because I think one of the challenges I feel in India is social sciences is not taken very seriously, and not much of interest among education institutes. Even the children don't actually are not they're not encouraged to kind of go down that stream. So hardly much of focus on social sciences, and the research output is quite limited. So yeah, this is where I'm just curious to know, if I may just, yeah, those are my points, if I may.
Yeah, excellent points. I think they're very good. Yeah. So, yeah, should the world just focus on science? So we have all these huge UN development goals. And I say to my students, climate change or the weather, the pollution in Delhi is not going to be solved by a meteorologist or, in Ames, Delhi. We can't just have physicians who are very good at science, because a lot of the world's wicked problems, like gender inequality, which happens in the UK. I mean, I've interviewed doctors and people. It's not like it's just a problem in the global South. So all these wicked problems that are very hard to solve need social science. So we've just put an article from a paper from our research on physicians in the journal Social Science and Medicine. And when I was at UCL, I taught a lot of doctors and dentists who were frustrated. Like, it's fine, you can be a brilliant medic, a brilliant physician, but if you don't have the money, you don't have the political will and understanding of society, maybe my illness is because my husband beats me up, or I'm too poor, or I live in horrible housing. So it's great to have science, and we're obsessed with, AI and science and technology, and that people are clinicians. But I think the most powerful people who also have an understanding of social science too, because you have to persuade politicians and so on. So we do blogs and LSE and sort of disseminating. We do workshops. We've done workshops in Ames, Jammu in particular. I have a workshop in University of Delhi in a few weeks' time, trying to get that message out that, it's not, I've seen in Saudi Arabia, it's not just about fixing the women, or if the women aren't flourishing, then the men will suffer too. So we want every talent in society to be supportive, and we don't want physicians dropping out, all these senior women, or these really talented women to be wasted in society. But don't blame the women, don't blame the men. Change systems, flexible working, women coming back when their kids have gone to university, working from home. How can we be more creative about making the most of our talent? So when we interviewed physicians in the UK, most of them did not have straight career routes. They would take a year off. They would take a year in medical while they were in medical school, in a business school. They would be locums. They do a PhD. Career paths aren't straight, and maybe they're working 2 days a week only. And in other parts of the world, you can't have that flexibility, and I don't see why not. It's better to do 2 days a week working than no days a week. if you're a surgeon or whatever your skills are required, as long as you can keep up your skills. So yes, I think we need to encourage children to understand that social science matters and the arts, as well as STEM disciplines, and for these things to be taken seriously. So Ursula von der Leyen, I saw, was in Delhi and did a great job. I think she's amazing, that woman, looking for win-wins in the trade. She's a medic, has 7 kids, sleeps in her office, I think, sometimes, and is making a real difference by being a politician and not just by being a specialist. She was a women and health children specialist. So I'd hope, if we can bring social science and medical science and other forms of science together, I think that's powerful in empowering everyone, including men. Yeah. Thank you for that.
All right, thank you. I think Akhil must
any ideas on how we can disseminate better? I don't know. Yeah.
So I'll come back to one more question later on. But anyway, Akhil, do you have a question?
Thanks, Srinivas. Thanks for the wonderful session. It's really enlightening. So I just want to ask how to enable those cross-collaboration research things within Indian, because the mentality back in India is mostly either you do engineering or into medical or into accounting. So that's what many people go for. If anyone opt for other than these 3 or 4 popular domains, you would be seen as a failure. So how to enable this culture where everything is interrelated and each specialization has its own importance, so that we can have those cross collaboration between different domains, and also which can help create better place for not only for women but for entire people based in India.
Yeah. So I was lucky when I went to UCL, which is very STEM, and we had a new business school for health. So we were in a business school, but we also had kind of health specialists and a very strong medical school as well. And currently when I'm at Brunel as well. So the first moment I arrived at Brunel, I went to talk to my colleagues in the medical school. Yeah, so interdisciplinary research is difficult because we have different disciplines. And my first degree was in English literature. Nowadays, nobody would, the arts, the languages, history, these subjects are just getting killed because everyone assumes, as you say, every kid should be an engineer or a doctor. But someone has, or an accountant, but someone has to organize, someone has to have the political will, and other types of knowledge, not just technical knowledge. So I think from some of the women we've seen, they started off their careers as very technical, coding, IIT, and then this wonderful woman who works for Microsoft, actually, somehow she managed to work in the philanthropy arm of Microsoft, getting in as a coder, but actually then repackaging herself as a corporate social responsibility. So following her passion, and someone else worked in finance and worked on data analysis in an NGO, and then also pursued her passion for developing giving back communities. So hopefully kids can understand, I remember Deepak Jain or somebody telling me once, you talk to these kids, it's like, I want to go in the city and I want to earn £250,000 working in the city of London. And, they work 20 hours a day, they never see the daylight. And you can get trapped in that kind of lifestyle. And they realized by the time they're 35, they don't want to do it anymore. So hopefully we can educate kids to realize that there's more to life than just consumerism. And the real difference in life is giving back and making better society, which may be a scientific solution, but if they're wicked problems, they're more than science. Yeah. So science plus, I don't know how you get that across. Yeah.
Thank you. And also on top of that, you could see some politicians calling those arts degree as Mickey Mouse degrees nowadays, exactly. So which is also creating a lot of problems for people to choose those kind of disciplines. Yeah, thanks for the answer. Thank you.
I mean, if I may say, the larger worldview that I can see is the entire world functions on economy, GDP, and raising stocks. And if that's the case, all the countries have to compete in this current market-driven world. And everybody seems to therefore be caught up in careers which actually make good money. So when you actually have market-driven kind of career choices, I guess the opportunity for those choices which may not actually be financially lucrative and social welfare oriented, they may actually take a back seat. This is my observation. I mean, do you have any comments on that?
Well, you can do both, hopefully. So, maybe you are a capitalist marketeer in a private hospital making lots of money, but that doesn't stop you from being on a board of a charity. Or so if you see Bill Gates or these Steve Jobs, I don't know about Bezos, but they do have their fellowships and their foundations, and they do give back. So if you look at life holistically, money is not going to make you happy, is it, in the long run? So it's great that you are improving the GDP and you've got your stocks and shares. But there's no point if we're just shooting each other. At the moment, the world's money seems to be spent on defense, missiles and anti-missiles. And we need to build sense of community and spirituality. And I think even like pilgrimages, the numbers are going up. People want to find something beyond themselves and their paycheck and their consumerism. So an understanding of poetry and spirituality and a more holistic view, mindfulness and other things, I think is very important, because otherwise you just burn out chasing your next paycheck if you're not careful. But yeah, of course, with the cost of living crisis, people are following what they think is most kind of financially rewarding, but it may not make you feel fulfilled, I guess.
Okay, so I will save my question for later. Does anybody else have
Could I
questions?
ask something or make a comment?
Yeah, please. You are the host.
Basically, I really like going to temples and relating to the statues of goddesses. And in the temple, like, men come, women come, they're very respectful. They look at the statues of the goddesses and there's a real respect there you can feel. And maybe it doesn't always translate into society, that women aren't given that kind of respect that you might find if people go to the temple, they look at the statue of the goddess, they pray, everything's fine. But then when they leave, maybe they don't respect women, they don't see them as equal partners, and maybe there's this kind of disconnect.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that's an important observation, and I think most of these things we will have to work upon. For instance, one of the statistics that we have seen from the presentation was that India, particularly this presentation is about India, so it's lagging behind in the rankings, global rankings. So obviously we have a lot of work to do. Soniaji, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I was just listening in, and it's really an interesting discussion. I never looked at the statistics in this way. So thanks for bringing all this information. And like, the person who was speaking earlier was saying about the temples. Yeah, going to the temple and praying with Shakti Ma, or Mata Kali, Durga, and all those festivals that we have, but then we don't look at our the feminine gender in the same way everywhere else also. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that changes. I know from the time that I was born in India, came here to US about 35 years ago, and I see a lot of improvement in the enablement, I should say, for females to have the ability to work. A lot of families know that it takes two incomes to make the house work, and that is possibly part of it. And so there is support, but yeah, depending on the cultural nuances and changes, it may be different in different parts of India, where a female child is married at a very young age, does not have a choice, versus another person who has the choice to do what they want. So it's what are your thoughts on that? That it's more of a culture and a thought, where they are brought up and the community that they live in, versus just, or maybe you covered it and I missed it. Sorry.
No, you're right. There's a huge. You can't treat India as one single homogenous country. So there are matrilinear parts, I think, aren't there, like Kerala and I think in the northeast as well. One person said my parents were hugely supportive of having an only daughter. My father said, I treat my daughter like gold, and women should be able to work. But someone set up their own waste company because she moved somewhere remote with her husband and didn't know what to do. And she said that was hugely stigma. Her mother lost friends because her daughter was set up a waste company. So I guess I was reading the bio of the only director of AIMS, a female, who was a very powerful woman. We've had for the first time a Chancellor of the Exchequer and head of finance who's a woman, but you had one way before we did. You're head of the budget in India. So there are these stereotypes. But I guess where there aren't enough formal jobs in the economy or opportunities, of course, men are not going to give way for women, are there? So, in your patriarchal society, however much you love your mother or your sister in the workplace, discrimination will persist in any society. If there's a shortage of opportunities, the men are going to get them before the women.
Yeah.
Okay, so we actually are an NGO. It's called Hindu Mitra Foundation. I've been looking at the possibility of having a women empowerment program. In fact, we were calling it Nari Shakti as well. Almost like something to bring in physical, mental, and spiritual fitness, if I may put it that way. Would you have any advice on how we can incorporate such a program? Knowing, I think one of the some of the constraints I see for women in urban setting particularly is there isn't much of space to move around. You can't walk on the roads. You don't have footpaths, for instance, to go for a walk. You have to actually kind of travel to somewhere like a different setting to have a bit of exercise or your own space and so on. So I think it's a bigger problem generally with physical fitness and that kind of situation anyway, and much more so for women is what I see. And to be honest, what tends to therefore happen is they become there's a lot of obesity. There is underneath all that. What then tends to happen is perhaps a lot of restricted lifestyle of just watching television at home and not much. So overall, I think the quality of life is not so good. And one of the hopes, therefore, is through our organization, we want to kind of bring in that level of empowerment among women. So if you have any advice, please, for that.
Yeah, I had a colleague from Delhi who was with me for 2 weeks in the summer, and he said, "Wow, you walk all the time in London." It's like, well, of course we do. And we don't walk because it's either hot or monsoon or it's smog. So we just, as you say, sit at home and watch TV. So that's quite constraining. And then, it leads to obesity and loss of self-esteem. I mean, what you have that we don't have is all this domestic labor or this cheap help in India. So people were telling me when they're looking for a bride for their brother, they don't want to come to the UK because they don't have all that kind of wraparound of domestic help. Yeah, what I found out, we were interviewed physicians in the UK, women, and they said actually in some ways the pandemic was liberating because so much was online that they didn't have to go out, or conferences that they couldn't afford to go to, or travel overseas because of childcare. They could attend when they normally couldn't. And people were saying, having a role model, having a women's only online course. So Jane Dacre, who was the dean of the medical school at UCL, who does a podcast, Medical Women Talking. One of the young women I interviewed, who was from Sri Lanka originally, said we had this wonderful 10-week program online. It was just like 90 minutes, one evening a week or something. And we had like role models, women who did have 4 kids and were still president of the Royal Society of GPs or something, telling us about their lives and their harassment experiences and how they dealt with their careers. So, and then being able to have one-to-ones with them. So mentoring, sponsorship. And I actually talked to someone at Great Ormond Street, and she said, I look at men's CVs and they're just fantastic. They're always leading on something. I got this research money. I'm on this board. They're very strategic. And I look at these women, it's like, what have you been doing? Why didn't you lead this project? Why have you never been on a board? So I say to my students, even if it's like the school committee, that your primary school that your kids go to, try and show some leadership, get some exposure, get someone, a speaking opportunity like a webinar, and get some men or women that can help guide you. Yeah, the physical fitness, I don't know. I think I'm doing an MSc in mental health at the moment, and I'm very conscious of going out every day. I walk to the park, even if I'm working at home a lot, to get out and move. But if climate change is making that difficult, I think that's kind of serious. Physical health then has impact on mental health. So I think if you can do things online with women or men who've broken through the system, who can personalize some of the advice, my experience that has been very inspiring for people, because you have kind of a mantra. It's like if she could do it with 4 kids, and she also was in a harassment situation like I've been in, and this is how she dealt with it, maybe I can do the same. So it's like you do need to give people space.
The new contender for London Mayor, Lila Cunningham, also has 7 kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some of these people have investment banker husbands with 6 nannies, so it's not always so hard. But like Beyonce had like 6 nannies, I think. Yeah.
Right.
So marrying well can help too.
Yeah, but there is a myth in India. One of the myths is that less number of kids, the better the lives are. And unfortunately, they're restricting to 1 child, and it's not really a healthy family in my view, because 1 kid grows with no companion.
Or 1 kid. Yeah, it's better to have 2 than 1, I think. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else before we close for today? Right. If not, Karanji, would you like to conclude then?
Well, thank you, especially to Julie, for coming and being with us and sharing some valuable insights from her research. And she also loves India. She's going quite soon again, and hopefully she'll see the Taj Mahal in Jaipur. And if any of you are interested to contact Julie in the future, I think if you send your contact details, and we'll be happy to continue the cooperation and the dialogue.
Perfect. So Karanji knows where we are from, Vishakhapatnam. So if ever you come down south to Andhra Pradesh, do please spare a couple of days to visit us and see what programs we do. And so
Yeah, I was thinking both of them should make a trip. Karanji, you should both make a trip and come over maybe for Deepavali. October, November, it'll be good.
Great. Thank you very much.
Would love to have you both here.
And if you're in London, please do see us too. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, this is Sonia. I just have one thing more to share that, it's not very often that you hear men talking about equality for women. I don't know. You have women talking about equality for women, but not men talking about it or sharing stats. Once in a while you do. One of the colleagues that I know, he is helping girls in India with feminine hygiene for children that cannot afford it in schools. He has a nonprofit organization, and I think this is a good extension. This conversation is a good extension on that. Is not just providing them education, but also enabling them and helping them understand that they have value, as much as men do.
Yeah.
So,
and I think men who
maybe
only
I
have
will,
daughters, they suddenly start talking about equality because then they realize what life is like. Yeah. So my daughter went to Cambridge in all girls college, and then they did a follow-up survey of some of these girls who'd gone in the city, really well-paid jobs, and they said, yeah, there is discrimination out there. However well educated we are, there's still rife, in the UK. So yeah. So yeah, the more men speak up too is important. I think when they only have daughters, they realize how tough it is. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, even if it was not as tough for them, for their generation, maybe it is. So, yeah. So I'll connect, I'll check with him and maybe connect the two of you and see if there's a way to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, namaste.
Namaste.
all right.
Namaste,
Okay,
everyone.
I will just end with the Shanti Mantram, Karanji. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukha bhavet. Om Shanti. All right. Thanks once again for coming over, and wish you all the best with your project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.